Malison: The Cursed City is a fantasy survival horror RPG published by Devolver Digital, currently in development, in which you investigate a sinister city filled with hundreds of grotesque monsters, demons, and weirdos. It focuses on exploration and atmosphere. Its main influences are both classic Western RPGs like Baldur's Gate, Japanese RPGs like Final Fantasy, as well as survival horror games such as the Resident Evil and Silent Hill series. As you sneak through the city, you encounter all sorts of strange characters, many of which you can speak to, trade with, recruit to your cause, steal from, or even attack if you so choose. You can approach this game in a million ways. It's up to you how you plan to survive. Your actions may lead to wealth, disaster, betrayal, or may even lead to uncovering some of the city's darkest secrets and the game's many hidden endings. The main character is no powerful hero. You awaken in the city transformed into a weak, frail goblin, and may need to rely on desperate measures for your survival. You will likely need help from other survivors you meet, and it is up to you to decide who you trust and recruit to your cause. Combat is in a classic turn-based style with a focus on managing scarce resources and building unique strategies by recruiting all sorts of different party members, equipping them and teaching them new skills. Monsters move closer to you during combat, increasing the threat and tension as they begin using their more devastating attacks. You do not want them too close. I stream development work of Malison Tuesday to Friday at 7 p.m. EST on Twitch. I also have new development update streams on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. EST. There is also a Discord you can join for the game. Check below. Malison: The Cursed City is a fantasy survival horror RPG published by Devolver Digital, currently in development, in which you investigate a sinister city filled with hundreds of grotesque monsters, demons, and weirdos. It focuses on exploration and atmosphere. Its main influences are both classic Western RPGs like Baldur's Gate, Japanese RPGs like Final Fantasy, as well as survival horror games such as the Resident Evil and Silent Hill series. As you sneak through the city, you encounter all sorts of strange characters, many of which you can speak to, trade with, recruit to your cause, steal from, or even attack if you so choose. You can approach this game in a million ways. It's up to you how you plan to survive. Your actions may lead to wealth, disaster, betrayal, or may even lead to uncovering some of the city's darkest secrets and the game's many hidden endings. The main character is no powerful hero. You awaken in the city transformed into a weak, frail goblin, and may need to rely on desperate measures for your survival. You will likely need help from other survivors you meet, and it is up to you to decide who you trust and recruit to your cause. Combat is in a classic turn-based style with a focus on managing scarce resources and building unique strategies by recruiting all sorts of different party members, equipping them, and teaching them new skills. Monsters move closer to you during combat, increasing the threat and tension as they begin using their more devastating attacks. You do not want them too close. I stream development work of Malison Tuesday to Friday at 7 p.m. EST on Twitch. I also have new development update streams on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. EST. There is also a Discord you can join for the game. Check below. Hello? How y'all doing? It's time to... I don't know if I'll be able to finish it this time, but I think I might bring it pretty close. I think I'll definitely finish the hurt animation. And I'll probably get started at least on the attack animation. I don't know if I'll be able to finish the attack animation though. Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
What can I say about Pars? Well, Pars is a bit of a blank slate, a little bit like Sam. So there isn't really much to say. What I can tell you about Pars is that Pars is not a goblin. That's important to know. Pars, not a goblin. Well, I would hope so. That would be a very passive game if none of your actions did anything. Is there anything I wish I had known when getting started with the art? I think... I mean, if you're already doing, like, if you're already doing art, like, other than pixel art, then my number one advice for pixel artists doesn't really apply that much to you. Normally the advice I give, Scholarist Avis, normally the advice I give is to not just do pixel art, but also practice drawing on paper. Or just other, like, art in general. Mainly because pixel art is very slow. And because it's so slow, it takes a while to get better at it if it's the only kind of art you do. It takes a long time to get better at it because it's just so slow. Your first sprites are going to take forever compared to, like, you know, sketching. You know, you can get 10 sketches done in an hour, but you can only get, like, you know, 1 sprite done in an hour. And that makes a difference. That means getting better at drawing overall through pixel art is very slow. So you shouldn't rely on pixel art to get better at drawing overall. You should sort of separately get better at drawing by practicing, you know, freehand drawing and all that, or painting or anything else. Well, no, pixel art tends to be very sort of meticulous. I mean, you can see, like, how long it is taking for me to detail that frill here. There's a lot of meticulous detail work in pixel art, because pixel art is kind of all about the details. And that can make it very slow. Well, okay, it would be very rough sketches, but 10 sketches in an hour. I mean, we're talking quick sketching. You know, but you can't really. I mean, you know, if you do a lot of art, you've probably done this kind of exercise where, like, you make a bunch of sketches with different amounts of time. You know, like, okay, your first sketch is like 10 seconds. Your second sketch is like 30 seconds. Then another one is like a minute long, and then 2 minutes long, and then you have like a 5-minute sketch. You know, this sort of thing. That's a common kind of exercise. Yeah. You know, stuff like that. You can't really do this with pixel art. Well, you can, but it feels very awkward to do in pixel art. You can't do it. You can just essentially do freehand drawing with a tablet in pixel art. But that's not really what people usually think of for pixel art. With pixel art, people generally think of, like, finished pieces only, basically, right? Yeah, you can kind of do that. You can do, like, just gesture drawing. Which, I mean, people have called, like gesture drawing using, you know, a paint program is they call that index painting usually. Or, I mean, there's, like, an older term for it, oikaki or something, which is, like, an old term for, like, a type of image board, I think. There's, like, a type of image board where people always, like, drew the images. Yeah, it feels very different. It feels like a completely different activity. But, like, that's the thing, too, is that, the thing, too, is that, like, if you're sketching in pixel art in that way, then you're actually not practicing pixel art at all, because you're doing something completely different from pixel art at that point. You know, you're really just doing the same kind of drawing that you would do you know, like, you know, on with a tablet doing any kind of drawing, right? Like, the actual practice of pixel art is the little dot-based, you know, what I'm doing right now. If you're not doing this, then you're doing the same thing as, like, just painting in, like, a painting program. So you're not practicing pixel art anyway at that point. Which is fine, because then you're just practicing your gesture drawing. So that would actually kind of count as... That would actually kind of count as practicing something else, like I'm saying, like I'm suggesting. So I guess one way to phrase what I'm saying differently is, don't only stick to highly detailed pixel art. Try to get some other, you know, quicker kind of sketchy practice going on too, or otherwise it's going to be way too slow to practice. Yeah. So, I mean, if you have this approach, and especially if you use a tablet to draw, to do pixel art, then yeah, like, just sketching and just moving on after a few sketches will also work. But that's the thing, too, is that when you sketch like this in, like, a painting program, it's gonna limit you a little bit more in, like, how much you can practice your values. How much you practice shading, because the kind of way you're going to approach a sketch in pixel art is usually going to be pretty different from sketching on paper, right? Like, usually, I mean, I guess it depends on your style of how you do, like, your initial sketches. But I feel like most people, when they do a sketch in pixel art, they just go for form and not really shading. And so that would kind of take away sort of like kind of a shading practice from that sketching that you would get more on like a freehand drawing practice. There's a few particularities about how people might approach Well, thank you, Shalkil. Yeah, usually your focus when you're sketching pixel art is going to be different. Yeah, when I sketch something in pixel art, I usually work from like just big blobs of color. I just like rough out the general shape of something, just with big blobs, and just kind of sculpt the shape over time. Hey, Himenian, thank you. Oh, ever since playing Labyrinth of the Demon King, I've been thinking a little bit. You know, often when I play a good game like this, you know, it's gonna get me thinking about, you know, what would a game like this that I make look like, you know? That's always a fun little thought experiment. It's a little tricky for sort of a King's Field-like because a lot of elements of a King's Field-like are really outside of my expertise. So I don't think I could really make a game like this, or at least I would need a lot of people with me, you know. But yeah, I've been thinking of, you know, if I wanted to make a King's Field-like, how different would I make it? What would I do? What would I do to make a King's Field-like feel like, you know, feel like my game, you know? I'm not sure yet. Yeah, it would definitely have some colorful, weird goobers for enemies. Yeah, it would probably be billboarded sprites. Probably. I think part of it that I would find interesting. I mean, the kind of thing I'm doing here too is like when you say something like that, what you're really saying is, what kind of game would you want to play? You know, like what changes would you make to that genre? You know, what kind of variant on that genre would you be most interested to play, right? But, you know, game dev brain is going to make you think of this in terms of how would you make it differently. I think part of it is, I think I would try to make a game like this where it feels like you can kind of improvise in combat. Where it feels like you can sort of like grab a weapon on the fly. you know? Like, maybe a game like this where there is, like, kind of like two different play styles, and they feel very different. Like, on one hand, you can play defensively, and you feel like a tank. You have your shield up at all times. Maybe some ways that the game is built would make it easy to play that way. Like, maybe something like, you know, you have a shield out, but like, you're always blocking. You don't need to, like, use a button to block. Like, if an enemy is attacking you from the front and you have a shield equipped, you always block. And maybe, like, you know, blocking a hit, like, drains your stamina, that sort of thing. So it kind of gives you, it's really like it's giving you some sort of, you know, some sort of shield protecting your health. But maybe, like a very strong difference between, like, how you play when you play defensively and how you play if you play aggressively. I think that would be fun. Like, the kind of game where, like, the way you play at the start when you begin playing, and the kind of way that you play it later when you have more experience has, like, a huge contrast. You know? Like, you see someone playing the game for the first time, and they're, like, slowly, carefully, deliberately moving through, you know, a battle, you know, with, you know, carefully timing their attacks and trading with enemies. And then someone with experience instead is just running through the battlefield, you know. It's like a much more dynamic looking battle. Like, just a huge contrast between the two. Like, it just looks like they're completely dominating the fight. Instead of letting the enemies kind of like, sort of, give the pace to the battle. The battle is entirely driven by the player instead. When they're, when you have the experience and you know how it works. You know, basically a game that lets you be very defensive, but if you want to be aggressive, it gives you a lot of tools for it, you know? Yeah, something like, I mean, I'm basically thinking of Shadow of Rome stuff here. I'm basically thinking of, like, bringing Shadow of Rome combat into, you know, like, a Kingsfield slow dungeon crawler. Which, you know, that's always how I'm gonna think of these things. That's just how it is. Yeah, Shadow of Rome had this way of really rewarding you for being aggressive. Like, if you lose your weapon in Shadow of Rome, in a way you become more dangerous than before you lost it. Because that kind of forces you to be really aggressive. And so eventually you end up, like, throwing your weapons a lot. You end up, like, doing some very... Yeah, like, the way you play this game, once you've already beaten it, is completely unrecognizable from how you play it at first. Like, the kind of things that happen in Shadow of Rome when you know what you're doing is, like, you throw your weapon at someone, and then while they're staggered, you run at them, grab their own weapon from their hand, and kill them with it. You know? Like, you don't know you can do that at first. Once you realize that you can be this aggressive, the game feels completely different. Now, doing that is risky. but it's very satisfying when you pull it off. It ends up making this game that really feels like really scrappy combat where you're constantly like improvising, and I've never really played another game that felt like that. But it doesn't feel like a character action game or anything, although there's a lot of in common with character action games. It doesn't really feel like one because it's very like the controls are closer to something like Dark Souls. It was way before Dark Souls though. So the controls feel very deliberate, very slow, but it just gives you a bunch of tools for you to get just really aggressive and quick. And I think a lot of the big limitations that a game like this would have, something that would prevent a game like this from working like that, is usually like inventory management is slow, is not really something you do on the fly in a game like this. And that's sort of like the biggest barrier, I think, to this kind of design. You know, you grab a weapon, it goes to your inventory, and now you need to, you know, go into your inventory to change items. It's not something you just grab and use. So it doesn't really have that flow to it. So I think it would need to be a game that has this sort of flow. Where, you know, if you grab a weapon and you don't have anything equipped, it just goes straight to your hand. Something like that. Oh, I tried a little bit of Abionic Factor earlier. I was curious about that game a bit, and I've been liking it so far. I didn't play much of it yet. I've been a bit curious about it. Seems like a survival crafty game with, you know, with pretty decent level design, and that sounds pretty good to me. The previous game that I played that was trying to be this, in the end, was a bit disappointing to me. It was that Lord of the Rings one. You know, in the end, it didn't really have that much level design, and I don't know. Yeah, I didn't really like it that much. But this one so far seems promising. It's basically, if you haven't played it, it's basically like an open world-ish, Half-Life with crafting. That's kind of how it plays. The Half-Life inspirations are very obvious. They're not hidden. They're very deliberately trying to evoke it. Yeah, usually those games have very cookie cutter sort of pseudo level design, so I tend to I mean, sometimes I still have some fun with them, but That's another type of game that I could maybe see myself making at one point. I've made prototypes of, you know, side-scrolling RPGs before. That might be another one that's could be a fun future project. But those can be pretty ambitious. An Ys-like, a Phazanadu-like, a Zelda 2-like. I don't know how else to call them. I think Phazanadu is really the example for me. But also like Wanderers from Ys too. Ys or Wise, I never know. I always forget how you're supposed to pronounce that. Ys, yeah. Wanderers from Ys is not. I don't recommend that game. It's a really. It's an awfully. It's a really badly balanced game. It's kind of awful to play at first, especially at the very start. You have to grind in the first room of the dungeon for like 5 minutes to be able to make any progress. It was a different time. Oh, it's time for, speaking of, it's time for a first stretch, folks. Let's do it. When you make noises, it's because you're stretching good. Yeah, a game like that, that's definitely a type that I've thought about before. We've even tried making one in a game jam at one point, but that didn't go very well. That one was kind of a fiasco. They can't all be winners. Another type of game that I found was kind of interesting to think about, like how would you make a different one, is Harvest Moon-like. Or a Stardew Valley-like, you know? Like, what would you make? How would you make one of those games differently? I think if I wanted to make a farming sim, it would probably be very different from the normal kind. Yeah, it would need to be in some way like an exploration focused one, you know? I think it would need to be. I think it would be like a farming sim on like an alien world where you have to like discover the like part of the game would be discovering the weird sort of rules of the ecosystem in like, you know, it would be like you've crash landed on this alien world, and in order to have any chance to make it out, to like escape, you need to survive there for a while to be able to like mount some sort of expedition, to be able to like retrieve stuff, to repair your broken ship. Like repairing your broken ship would be the entire point, I think, right? Like repairing your ship would be like the goal, and some parts of it, some of the repairs would require you like exploring very far from where you've landed, and maybe like some of it would require some very elaborate crafting and all stuff like that, right? So just repairing your ship would, you know, would require you like to you would probably need to like research the plants, the things you gather, some sort of like, you know, some sort of like some sort of a research system, I think, would be a like maybe you'd have some sort of analysis machine, and you could give it like any item you collect. Maybe you would need like a certain number of samples of certain items to be able to tell you what you can do with them, you know? And I think a lot of the game would be about collecting knowledge about this place. So it would feel like an exploration game first. Because exploration would be like your first step towards being able to survive here. Like without understanding that world, without like you wouldn't know which plants and which fruits are edible without researching them, you know? So you would probably have you would probably have like some supplies to get you started, so you have some time before you need to start eating things you find. You know? Yeah, I was kind of disappointed by Graveyard Keeper. I remember playing this and then really quickly losing interest. Like it felt less like a farming game than what I expected, and ended up feeling more like a like instead of feeling like a farming game, it felt more like a it felt more like just a chores game, I guess, instead of like a farming game. It didn't feel like I was really managing anything. That was like a weird that was like kind of a disappointment for me with Graveyard Keeper. Yeah, I feel like I didn't really get the game. Yeah, it felt like more of a just a it felt almost more like a yeah, I don't know. Kind of felt like it was just a game with a bunch of chores for you to do, and things kind of unlock as you do more of the chores. And that's it. Like I didn't really feel like I was managing anything. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I just didn't play it long enough for interesting things to happen or something. Or maybe I just got the wrong idea from what kind of game it was. Sometimes that's the only problem, right? Sometimes like this is a game that you would have maybe liked if you went into it understanding what it was, but because your expectations didn't quite fit what it was giving, you just, you know, you go in with some, you know, all you see is that it's failing to be what you thought it was trying to be when it was actually trying to be something completely different. So sometimes your expectations is just, can just ruin something. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like okay. So I feel like one of my favorite parts of games like this is sort of exploring a space, but also exploring like the mechanics of the game. I feel like that's a really exciting part of games like this, like exploring sort of like the exploring like the space you're in for like whatever systems there are, figuring out everything that you end up doing, everything you can do in the game, slowly like unlocking new things. Like that's also kind of exploring, right? And I think if I wanted to make a farming game, I would want to lean into that. I would want to make it that like unlocking things you can craft and things you can build would be also kind of a game of its own. And it would feel like exploration too. And so I think most things you can craft would be tied to exploring the world and finding things and analyzing them, and that would give you new things to craft. Maybe also you would find like old technology. There would probably be some sort of old, alien civilization that you're unearthing as you explore. Of course, you kind of have to do that. And those, like, you would maybe unearth or like find old technology from them, and those could maybe be like the most advanced things you can make. Could be like reverse engineering some of the alien tech or something, and maybe that would be like the end game tier stuff. And there would be something like, if maybe you would find some early tech for it, but it's probably too advanced for you to figure out. And there's like things you would need to do to be able to start, figuring out how that old alien tech works. And maybe some of it, maybe it would be like, maybe there would be something where like you can try to analyze something, but if it's too advanced somehow, it doesn't let you craft it or repair it, but it lets you kind of try to use it. So it kind of unlocks using it if you figure it out. Like if you sort of partially identify what something is, it can kind of tell you what it is, but you can't like repair it or make it yet, right? And then maybe later, like if you improve, whatever you use to analyze things or something, like as you improve like your base of operations, you get to interact with that technology more. Maybe you find all the functions of the machine instead of just having some of them. And then eventually you can repair it if it's lightly damaged. Or maybe you can fully repair it. Or maybe you can even craft new ones. And then maybe you can even improve on it if you have the maxed out thing. Yeah, I don't know. Something like that. Something where like the tech tree and the crafting also feel like exploring. Where like part of how you progress through the game and your path through the game isn't just your path of exploration, but also your path through the tech tree. And like if analyzing something requires some sort of resource, either a time resource or some other like resources, that means that like people's experiences of what they found, like the kind of tech they had access to, would maybe be different too. So like maybe you could imagine someone playing through the game and being more focused on like the plants and the wildlife, and maybe they would unlock a lot of stuff around like using the natural ecology of the planet. And maybe they would focus on that. And maybe there are like end game tier stuff that's based on the natural world instead of like the alien stuff. But you need to get really advanced in figuring this out to get there, I'm not sure how that would work exactly. I feel like there's something there where you kind of have this sort of like free reign of where you put your efforts when it comes to understanding the world, what you focus on, where your interests lie exactly, you know? Yeah, of course. I mean, people eventually get to a point where they want to explore everything. I don't really mind that too much. As long as, like, the initial exploration has a lot of, you know, as long as your initial experience of it feels like it's something that's more based on your own interests. You know, as long as you feel like you're following your curiosity, at least at one point. Even if in the end you can end up sort of just analyzing everything. I don't know. This is the kind of thing where I would need to think a little bit more about exactly, not how to do it, but exactly what I would want from something like this. You know, it can be a little tricky to visualize the kind of thing you want from something like that. I'm not sure how I would do like a horror farming sim. I've seen a few attempts at it, but I think the attempts at it I've seen were like demos, not like a full game. A horror farming sim. I don't know. I don't know. So I've seen bits of I've seen like just bits of one. And I think it was just going for like just a basic like farming thing, but the exploration has like had like a turn-based combat, I think. Yeah. But I don't know if that would be like how I approach that. Maybe I would make what I would do for a horror farming sim would be like would be sort of like, you know, the land that you're using, your specific farm is like cursed in some way, and there is some horrible, terrible thing underneath the farm, and all of what you're doing, like what you're doing on the farm, is sort of empowered by this dark power, right? Yeah. I think Welcome to Elderfield. I think that's the one that I saw. I saw just a few clips of someone trying it, and I just saw. I didn't see enough to really see like everything it was doing, but it seemed like it's basically just like a Stardew Valley, but with turn-based combat and like spooky monsters when you explore. I don't know what it was doing regarding the farming itself. I'm sure it has some good ideas for that too, but I just didn't see that part. I just caught someone like doing exploration, I think, like between farming sessions. So I didn't see what they were doing with that specifically. Yeah, maybe something like that. I don't know. Like, would I want the farming mechanics themselves to be different, or would I want that part to be? Because there's like different approaches to something like this. One way to think of it is like a game that feels like the normal type of game, but then weird things happen, right? Like you could have an approach where, like think of the normal farming as like your daily routine, but then things happen to disrupt that daily routine. So the regular farming is sort of like the baseline normal that the game sets up, and then the disruptions happen, and like this is where like the horror comes in, is sort of disrupting that routine with spooky things, right? So that with that approach, the farming itself could be kind of normal, but is disrupted by unexpected things, right? And then that could be where the horror comes in. Um, and I think that could be a good approach. But I don't think it's how I would do it, because I think mechanically, I think I'd be more interested in like, yeah, just trying to dig into kind of an exploration thing. So I don't know if I would do that exactly. I think I mean, you would want something like, like there's something in your field, like there's something creeping through your cornfield. Stuff like that, right? Like you wake up and there's just a bunch of blood in your field and one of your animals was killed, right? And then, like, this is now a problem you have to deal with. And in investigating what the problem is, you could deliver a bunch of scares, right? It's like, think of it as like a normal farming game, but there's these things that happen that are kind of like these disasters, I guess, but there would be sort of a story. I don't know if they would always, I don't know if it would be, you could kind of have a roguelike approach where these things happen kind of at random. Or it could be, you could think of it as like a story. And so, like, maybe, you see like the first, this or that horrible thing happens to your field or to your farm, on the first summer or on that day specifically, or maybe with just a little bit of like variation. So it could be like a scripted thing. And that would make it a game that you play once instead of, that would kind of remove the replayability a little bit. Or potentially. Or maybe it could be more like a systems thing where maybe the horrible thing happening to your cattle is something you could have prevented. Maybe there's like a some sort of curse that could be placed on your town if this or that happens. And it's more about like figuring out all the rules that prevent this from happening to begin with, So it could be sort of like a scripted event, but that there's a lot of different things you can do to either stop it once it started happening or maybe preventing it from happening altogether if you know what you're doing. And that way, I don't know. There's a lot of ways this could go. A lot of ways this could go. But I don't know if that's what I would do. Like I said, I tend to really like exploration-focused stuff. So I feel like my take on that would need to involve you going somewhere. Would need to involve some sort of interplay between exploring one place and while your stuff grows back home, Dot Age. I don't think I know about Dot Age. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. A horror farming sim. How would I do it? Maybe it's like a farming sim where the reason you're farming is to like feed something. You're like feeding something. I made a game kind of like that at one point called Mandragora. And you were like, but it wasn't really a farming sim, it was more like a weird little toy game. Like it was a very basic game where you just have like a grid of plant plots. Didn't really have like a character. And you had like a central plant that you had to keep happy. I was thinking like there's some sort of like creature in your barn or something. And you have to like keep it fed. And all of your farming is all around keeping it fed. Or like you know, maybe it's ill. Maybe it's sick and you need to buy medicine or stuff like that. And if you don't do it right, if you don't do it in time, it gets worse. It gets more swollen or something. And like it's something that's clearly not human, you know? Some horrible creature, but maybe it's like implied to be your brother. So maybe it's like a yeah, maybe it's like, yeah, it's like your brother. Your brother is like a weird, horrible mutant creature, right? Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, you're playing as Bobby Burrows. You want to help your brother. Snip, snip. But yeah, I think that might be a fun thing where, yeah, you have like your brother, and maybe there's a bunch of things where like you need to also prevent people from going to check the barn or whatever the building is. So that's one of the things, one of the sort of side things would be to like prevent people from seeing your brother. Or if anyone sees your brother, you have to kill them or, you know, capture them. And that could get really fucking dire. Imagine if that happens like just naturally in the game. Like someone ends up seeing your brother, you know? And like you have to capture them. And you don't want to kill them because you're not a murderer. You're not a murderer. Right? So you capture them and now you just keep them captive somewhere. And now you have another mouth to feed. Like just something that where you have all of these weird like horror complications. And depending on how you play, different complications happen. Because of course if you don't care, you can just kill them right away. You just like it can just not be a problem, right? I think there could be something fun there. Like it's a farming game, but you're also just kind of managing just a horrible disaster of sorts. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Or you can start, you know, experimenting on them or something. There could be all sorts of weird shit. Weird horror shit that could happen. There's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of possibilities. Thinking about like, you know, thinking about like a sort of a resource or a tech tree. Well, thinking about like a tech tree here where it's more about like the kinds of horrors that you're willing to do instead of just this, you know, the options you make in a menu. And like you can imagine this on like an abstract level that, okay, there's like tech, right? And like equipment for the farm, but there's also like horrible things that happen to your brother as he becomes less and less human. Also kind of unlocks things maybe. And then maybe a separate thing where it's more like, you know, your own relationship to the dark gods, to the evil, you know, the evil deities, and maybe there's like a cult in town or something. And that could be how the game tries to make every playthrough a bit different. Because depending on what you choose to do there, with all of those things, you know, that could end up having like a big impact over what your farm looks like in the end game, right? And that could be pretty fun. And it could be this sort of thing where depending on what your farm is like by the end, your goals and how you solve problems becomes completely different. And in all sorts of different horror ways, you know? And you can try to be the good guy. You can try to, you know, There could be all sorts of ways to try to have like different good and bad endings, and you know, stuff like that could be pretty fun. It seems like it could be very complicated depending on exactly how this is thought out, and how, like, there's a version of this that's very simple but also not, you know, a bit more contrived and less fun. And there's versions of this that are extremely complicated and kind of like a pie in the sky game that can never really exist. You know? Like suspicion systems and things like that tend to be very difficult to do right. This sort of thing. Like, this kind of game where, like... this is kind of like, I don't know. There is kind of like a stereotype of fake like vaporware game. There's a very specific type of like vaporware game that I've seen many times over the years that are essentially like a serial killer simulator, right? I feel like Yandere Simulator was kind of an example of one of those, maybe? I'm not sure. I kind of feel like it might have been. Where, like, the selling point is that it's like, it's the kind of game that for it to be real, it would need to be a crazy advanced simulation of reality, because it needs to involve, like, different factions having suspicion and noticing you doing things, and it's like, it feels like it's like an impossible kind of game to actually make. It's like the kind of thing where the ideas seem easy to explain, but actually making them work in a way that is something the player notices is happening is extremely difficult. It's one of these things that, like, you can just say that you're going to make something like this, but in practice, it's actually like an impossible kind of game to make. And yeah, one of them was, I remember, there was I don't know if I would call it infamous, but there was an example of that on the old TigSource forums. There was someone that for a while got a lot of attention from essentially a vaporware project that purported to be essentially like a serial killer simulator. It was supposed to be like a roguelike where, like, you play as a serial killer and you have to, like, it was like the list of things that were described that you could do in the game, the kind of complexity, the inherent complexity that this implied. Not Hitman. It's way more complex than Hitman. Hitman is baby shit compared to what this was promising. This was promising an open world Hitman game where an entire city is, like, simulated and keeps track of who is suspicious of you. Like, we're talking, this is what I mean, right? Yes, exactly. It's like Hitman, but with Dwarf Fortress kind of complexity. And where it's actually more, I think it's probably more complex than Dwarf Fortress, you know? Shadow of Doubt? I don't know. We're talking about a type of, I was talking about this, a sort of, I guess almost like an archetype of vaporware that I've seen pop up several times over the years, where someone is purporting to make a kind of like a game that sounds kind of simple to explain, but is in fact impossible to make, because it's like a game that has like a large scale, like a large scale heist game, for instance, is one. Another example of this, sort of, but at least this is made by someone who has a lot of experience making games, so maybe that might happen one day, is Uplink 2, I think. Everyone here remember Uplink? That hacking game? Right? There's like this hacking game, like a classic hacking game called Uplink. The dev of that has been working for years and years, I think, as like on like essentially a sequel to Uplink that is one of those absurdly complex, impossible game projects where it's like Uplink, but instead of just being on a computer and everything just being a simulated computer world, it's a simulated city where every building is completely simulated with electronic systems, and you're essentially organizing like heists through computer systems over the entire city. That's that kind of thing. Like the kind of game that requires a level of simulation and complexity that kind of seems beyond any level of feasibility. Now, to be fair, if someone described to me Dwarf Fortress before I knew about Dwarf Fortress, I would presume Dwarf Fortress is one of those, because it really sounds like one of those when you'd... But, you know, they've been working on Dwarf Fortress for like 30 years or something, and it's still not done. So that shows you the level of complexity and depth that something of this, you know... So yeah, I think I don't know if it's called Uplink 2, but yeah, the Uplink dev has been working on some sort of either it's a sequel or a spiritual sequel, and it is an absurdly complex game, right? And that's the problem with this sort of game where you have like any kind of game that has like that is sort of like a roguelike based game that involves like simulating a large space in which you can do crime is going to be super complex to make. And you're going to need to fake some shit. You're going to need to make some stuff not actually a like you're going to need to put limits on what you're actually simulating and make some things, at least some things in there are going to need to be smoke and mirrors, you know? Yeah. And in the case of the Uplink thing, it's simulating in a whole city, but seen through a computer. So at least there, you have a certain level of simulation, like where at least it can be abstract to some degree, right? At least there is a level of abstraction there, but even with that level of abstraction, it's like, you know, it's fucking absurd. Yo, Scarodactyl, how's it going? Oh, Scarodactyl, you were on TigSource, right? Okay, this is gonna be a random poll. I don't know if you've been following what I was just talking about. Yeah, you were on TigSource, right? Oh, you were not. Okay, never mind. So I was about to ask you if you remember a specific thing that was infamous on the TigSource forums. I wonder here if anyone here is on from TigSource if they remember that. Because the first example of this I gave earlier for people joining in, there was an infamous piece. Yeah, how did I? Okay, maybe you remember then. There was a kind of infamous project on TigSource that was like, it was meant to be a roguelike that simulated being a serial killer. And in order to simulate this, it essentially simulated an entire city, like realistically. And the idea is that you could sort of like walk through the city and plan crimes and then just execute them. And it was entire vaporware. The guy was just faking that he was working on this. And so every time he talked about it, he kept just building up how complex it would be, talking about everything the game would simulate. And it was like just this growing list of impossible things. And this was at the time where people were like really like enthusiastic about Dwarf Fortress. So that probably also kind of helped their like the credibility of this, because that was kind of like someone, it's It's like, hey, we hear crazy shit like this from the Dwarf Fortress dev notes, all the time. So why not, right? But in this case, there was someone completely faking it. And one of the things I remember is that one of the things that they purported to be working on, and again, this was all fake. This was just vaporware, right? But one of the things they purported was that the game would have, like, you could take drugs in the game, and any drugs you take, the game would, like, simulate its effects. Right? So, like, if you took, yeah, like, it's that kind of thing, right? The game was, like, to an absurd degree of, like, detail in simulation. And that was because, of course, when you're just writing shit, when you're just making shit up, you can just make up, nothing is difficult to implement. You can just say shit. So you can just, like, give out these absurdly ambitious ideas and just say, yeah, I'm working on it. Isn't that cool? And you can just, you can just say whatever the fuck you want. But again, as a reminder, another thing that made it seem like it was maybe plausible is this was a roguelike, right? So visually, all they needed was to sort of describe things, like so that made it like a little bit more like credible, like the fact that this was technically a roguelike with just like ASCII graphics, I think probably helped to make those claims feel less like ridiculous. Yeah, he's got a little bit of denial Sam to him. But yeah, no, in this case, it was complete vaporware. I forget what happened, like how it was revealed. I think the guy just came clean at one point, because at one point he just stopped updating the thread and people kept asking and like hounding him about it. And at one point he just came clean, so people stopped bothering or something. But yes, so the guy who made the original Uplink is working on a project kind of like that. That seems like kind of impossibly complex. But in this case, it's someone who actually made a famous game before, so who knows? But it is essentially like it's like Uplink 2, but instead of just hacking computers, you're like organizing full heists. And in order to do this, it is simulating an entire city. It is simulating the networks and computers and electronics of an entire city, for you to like use as your playground, essentially. Which is again but again, at least this is someone with experience, so maybe they actually have a shot. But thing is, there's a lot of things like this that can sound really exciting, but it's easy to talk. Talk is cheap, and actually making something like that reality can sometimes be way harder than it looks, way harder than it seems. So yes, that kind of thing is the problem with trying to make. So all of this started because I was talking about like how, like if I wanted to make a farming sim, what could I maybe do differently? Like different approaches I might make if I wanted to make a farming sim. Just like just game design, talk. And I was musing on how would I try to make a horror farming sim, and just the different ways that people could maybe go about making a horror farming sim. And one of the possibilities would be, a game where like you're on a farm, but it might be like a I was thinking of an idea where like you're on a farm, and in your barn there's this big monster that you have to feed, right? And like this monster is like your brother or your sister or your father or something. something like that. And you have to like keep that creature fed in some way. And I was thinking of like, this could be the kind of game where like maybe you have to like keep that secret in some way, and there could be a bunch of little scenarios that could lead to like the townspeople finding out about the monster and then maybe coming in with pitchforks or something. And maybe you would need to do horrible things to keep the secret. That could be like a fun sort of avenue for horror in a farming context. Like a much more tense relation with the town. You know? And like you're kind of relying on the town because you got to sell your goods there and you have to buy some stuff there and stuff. But you kind of need to sort of it would be kind of fun to be like sort of like reproducing the the hostile farmer that's the hostile hermit farmer kind of character, giving you a reason to actually act like that. So you like naturally end up doing, oh, it's outsiders, get out of here, right? Actually, someone earlier brought up Clock Tower, so that's pretty funny. But yeah, that might be a fun approach for it. Like a farming game, but you have this sort of secret you have to keep. And maybe all sorts of things could happen that sort of could threaten that secret. And maybe like one of the approaches could be that like maybe one of the approaches is like I don't know. One of them was that maybe there's like different tech trees, and the tech trees could be kind of based on what you're willing to do. So it'd be sort of like a morality tech tree a little bit, where like, maybe you can feed more and more things to your brother, and that would like turn it like make him less and less human. And maybe the less and less human he is, the more access you have to like powers that he has, and maybe you could sort of base your playthrough on getting those powers. Or another thing could be like maybe you could worship different dark gods, and these could all be based on different things. And also there could maybe be the more human side of actually relying more on like human machinery and crafting. And like you could imagine like playthroughs focusing on each of these would end up with a very different looking farm at the end. And that could be an interesting thing. Just imagining imagining how different the farm could end up depending on which sort of path you take. Or it could be also like a combination of some of them. So I don't know. I think there could be something fun there, but this is why I was bringing up those impossible projects. Is that depending on how you want to handle the idea that you have a secret to keep, like that's really difficult. The mechanic of having to keep a secret is kind of difficult to make in a game like this. Like that's kind of a difficult thing to convey, Like that's the kind of there's not a lot of games where you have to keep a secret. And like there's a bunch of different approaches, and one of them is to just make it a story, like it's just a narrative, and there's like events in the story, and there's moments where you make a decision. That would be like the easiest approach. But making it something dynamic, that's when it risks turning into an impossible thing. Like a project of like impossible complexity. Like a dynamic secret or a dynamic crime system or anything like that can get really complicated. Yeah. I mean, just making it narrative, just making it like a VN, I think would be a perfectly acceptable thing. But if you can figure out a really clever way to make it something more dynamic, or maybe sort of something halfway through the two, where it's not exactly like exactly scripted events that happen, but more like events that are triggered by certain actions of the player, and so because of this, it feels dynamic because it's in response to maybe the growth of your farm or the use of specific things. It's like if you go past a certain like tier of like how monstrous your brother is, maybe at one point your brother turns into like past a certain point, maybe your brother roars a horrible monstrous noise, right? And that could sort of like set the game into like this state of like hunters going into the forest or looking for where that sound came from. Like you can imagine like moments triggered by specific actions of the player, and so that would be sort of like that would essentially still be like a VN sort of approach, but at least it would be sort of player directed. And like if you never push your brother to turn into that, like it wouldn't happen. So it would still kind of feel like it's based on the player's actions. Yeah, it's tricky. It is very tricky to make solid horror that isn't curated and instead is like a dynamic thing. I think it's possible. It's just really difficult. It is just a really tricky thing to do because, there's so much pacing that goes into horror, and this is the kind of situation where you're sort of giving up control over pacing in a lot of ways. I think is the kind of thing that's doable. It's just, there's just a lot of problems packaged into the idea that needs to be solved, right? Yeah. I think it's something that could be potentially doable. Just making like the rules for how something happened. Like you could sort of imagine it as like, okay, for this event to happen, yeah, you could imagine it that way. Like this event happens like your brother screaming, which leads to the people attacking you or something, or like coming to investigate. Oh, it's time right? To stretch. You could have like very mechanical things that are part of the trigger for what makes this happen, but then the actual moment that it happens could be based on like a built-in kind of like rhythm of the game sort of simulator, not simulator, but something that tracks like the pacing of the game. And if something important happened recently, maybe it holds off on it and like delays it from happening a little bit. Yeah, some sort of DM some sort of DM of the game that just sort of tries to manage the pacing of things and just kind of delays an event of a few days if something, and it could be just a few things. It could be just little tweaks that just prevent certain events from happening too close to one another, or like just something that just has a slight control that can, yeah. So something like that might be enough to do like a fairly good job of it. Also, let's do a little stretch, folks. Let's do a little stretch. It's stretching time. Ooh. Just had a thought for that imaginary farming game. Just had a thought about this. Maybe the game wouldn't start with like the giant monster already in your barn or anything. No. Maybe the game tries to tug at your heart a little bit more than that, you know? Maybe you actually start and like you're managing your farm with your brother, who's also like actually helping you around the farm. And the farm is there. Like he's actually a good help. Like it actually like the brother being there is almost like the game's tutorial because he makes everything easier to do. But then he falls sick, right? And now you have to start selling like your crops because you need to afford very expensive you need to be able to afford very expensive medicine. But he just keeps getting more sick, right? And he's back home. And now, so at first he starts out as sort of like something that makes the game much easier, but, he gets worse and worse, and he needs more and more medication, and it's not really clear if it's doing anything. And then he starts changing, and it becomes just it just becomes less and less human. And at this point, past a certain point, you kind of need to like make up excuses why the doctor can't see him, because of course past a certain point the doctor sees when he's starting to become inhuman. Now at first maybe a few times where he's on the edging on like being inhuman, like there's a few dialogues where you can like make excuses, or you can like maybe like he's hidden in the covers, you can't see him very well or something, so maybe there's like ways you can, but then after a certain point you need to make up excuses why he can't see him anymore, right? There could be something there, maybe. Yeah, although in a hospital setting, making it that there's a patient that can never be seen by anyone feels like that would be a little trickier to, at least in like a farm context, it's a bit yeah. In a farming context, at least you're isolated. But yeah, I like this. Like that would really fit well with like an early game pacing where like you're learning the ropes, and your brother would feel very useful just on a gameplay level, and so taking him away would actually hurt, right? And of course that would give a lot of opportunity to just give him character, to make you really genuinely like him, right? And then something happens. So probably in the farming, like during the tutorial, maybe there's an actual like trigger for all this that could sort of like set things in motion. And this is how he gets sick, right? And then the real game begins once he falls ill and he has to stay home, right? Yeah, there could be something really fun there, I think. I think that could be something pretty fun. And then, I guess, and maybe all of the different things you could do, like, maybe, like, the worshipping the weird gods could start out as, like, you just reaching out for anything you can that could maybe help him, right? Like, these are, like, desperate last resorts. You're trying to save his life and you don't know what to do, and you've tried so many things and none of it is working, so now you're turning to terrible things, and maybe this changes what happens to him. Like if you're receiving help from Cthulhu to keep him alive, that's not actually good. That would get yeah. Or there's like a witch. There could be like a weird witch that can help you. But there could be so many like different paths that you can take to try and cure him, and they could all have just equally horrible outcomes, right? Oh, that would be miserable. I think that would make for really good horror. I think that would make for, or sticking to sort of the human side of it would basically require getting enormous amounts of money to get increasingly more expensive medicine. Wait, I'm now realizing this is Breaking Bad. I'm kind of remaking Breaking Bad, but Eldritch. You know, this instead of crime, it's Cthulhu. This is kind of Breaking Bad, though.
Jesse, we need to rotate the crops, Jesse.
Yeah. Listen, I think this idea's got, the more I talk about it, the more I feel like this idea's got legs. Maybe I could try that next Ludum Dare or something. I don't know when the next Ludum Dare is. That sounds like it might be. That might be going somewhere. Maybe. Yeah. I do like the idea of like a really idyllic beginning that just goes so fucking wrong. And like there being a lot of different ways it can go wrong, right? Just horrible. Just so bad, you know? How many lines are you willing to cross to try to save his life? I think that sounds pretty fun. And heartbreaking, you know? That's still your brother in there. Just imagine the horrible moment you need to realize that it's not your brother in there anymore. Or is it? What if you need to put him down? What if you need to fucking old yeller him? But here's the thing. Here's the question. All right? Here's the big question. Yeah, if you're trying, it could reach a point where you're trying to put an end to his suffering, but now it changes the game where now he's like hostile or something like hostile. And it like now actually managing to kill him is almost more challenging than keeping him alive was, you know? Like maybe at a certain point, like he's been kept alive by these terrible forces. And now, like, killing him is not easy now, you know? Now he's gonna stay alive. It's just not in any form you would recognize as human, you know? Yeah, I mean, the barn-sized brother, it's the Dunwich Horror kind of deal. Except the Dunwich Horror, that's a little different. That would be more a horror of finding out about what your family was like, who your dad was. But here I feel like it's better if it's like, I think it's even better if it's like somehow him getting sick is your fault, like it should have been you, you know? Like he was doing something you were supposed to be doing when the thing happened that got him sick. And so there's this extra horror that this could have happened to you instead, but now you're seeing it happen to someone else. And it's like hard to even imagine what kind of hell he's going through. And that just keeps reinforcing this could have been you, this should have been you. There's a lot of horror in there. Oof. That's dire. Maybe. Yeah, it could be it. It could be it. You were just unearthing something. You had just found something and you got tired trying to unearth it. And then he took over for you and you went to go rest. And then the following morning, he's unearthed it all right. And he's warning you not to get any close, because... Yeah? The meteorite was no good. Yeah, there's something fun there. There's something pretty fun there. Boo. Thank you. That's the animation there. I don't know. I feel like... I don't think it would be quite... No, I don't think it would be modern setting. I think it would be... I don't know. Well, I mean, modern setting would need, like, you know, very different kinds of farming machinery. It would be very different. It wouldn't really be animal-based technology. So I feel like you kind of need to move a little back. You kind of need yeah. So I would probably not make it modern setting. Okay, here's the big question, though. Here's the big question. Would it be possible to actually save him? Would there actually be a good ending? I feel like there being an actual way to save him would make the whole thing feel more meaningful. Because then when you fuck up and horrible things happen to him, that would sting a lot more if there's an actual way to save him completely. You know? Like, I feel like it has a bit more weight. Your failure has a bit more weight if you could have actually done it. It's probably just absurdly difficult and requires, like, yeah, huge sacrifices. Actually, yeah. Maybe. But okay, what if letting him die? I mean, not of natural I mean, he gets sick. Like, it's not clear that the thing that gets him sick is a natural disease to begin with. Like, he might already be on a bad path from that. It's not necessarily that your attempts to cure him are what introduces the supernatural into the equation. Maybe he was already kind of doomed in that sense. And you're just, like, your attempts at remedies are just making things worse, you know? And maybe if he does just die and you bury him, maybe that, like, fails to lift the curse in some way. And now, like, the land is cursed. And, like, that just moves the game to another phase, you know? Like, you bury him and some horrible tree begins growing where you buried him. That kind of thing. Like, that could be sort of a thing where, like, your brother is just doomed. And, like, whatever you do only gets worse. Things are, like, your brother is, like, you know, uppercase D doomed, you know? Some bad shit's gonna happen to your brother, and your decisions just change how bad it is, you know? And maybe another part of it could be that, like, another sort of, like, B story here could be that, like, in trying to find ways to help your brother, you might be uncovering horrible things that are already happening in the town. And maybe one of the ways things can go is that, like, by uncovering all the horrible things the townspeople are doing, that maybe makes you feel better about sacrificing them for your brother. You know? Yeah, maybe this is why you get all of these solutions. Maybe this is why you can find all of these different solutions to help someone who's really sick. Is that, like, others are already kind of going through this. Mm. That barely happens. The port ID, do you mean the ship? You mean the cursed ship? Yeah. Did make a lot of monsters for that. I'm not sure what you mean about the hospital. Oh, right. Trying to think of what else I would kind of make differently in a game like that. What would I make differently? Sometimes I make little design documents. I do have a giant. I have like folders of like game ideas. Sometimes I make like basic. I put together some basic stuff. Sometimes I just go straight to making some kind of prototype. I've had a lot of random game ideas over the years. Well, I don't know. I think it depends. To me, it depends on if it, like, how big of an idea it is. Like, if it's a small idea on, like, how to implement something, or... Then I kind of want to write it down, but... If it's, like, a whole game idea... I tend to think, like... You know, if it's a really good idea, then I'll probably remember it. And if I forget about it, then, you know, maybe it wasn't that good. Maybe it wasn't that good. I do have one game idea. That's not really a game idea. It's more like it's like a partial game idea. I don't usually feel too jealous about my ideas. Like, I don't generally feel like super protective of little idea fragments, especially, you know, like these things I feel tend to be kind of worthless until you actually execute on them. But there's one idea I have that I've been very shy about sharing with anyone because I want to make it someday. And I would really hate for someone else to make it first. There's one idea I have that's like that. And I did tell it to a few people. I did slip up at one point and tell it to a few people. God damn it. Animal Crossing with guns, god damn it. Ah. You took it from me on Silent Well. God damn it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'll try to make something out of this farming game idea. Maybe. We'll see. Maybe a Lunum Dare, or maybe at one point I'll just on a weekend at one point I'll just randomly decide to make a prototype of it. That happens sometimes. Sometimes you just feel enthusiastic and you gotta do it. Grimshire? Nope. Is this an edgy Lord of the Rings? With edgy hobbits? Actual consequences? What does that even mean? If you don't play the game good, someone shows up and kicks you? Wind in the Willows? No, I don't think so. Ah. And so you lose NPCs to interact with if you don't do the farming enough? Huh. Damn. Yeah, that actually happened? I only played the Super Nintendo Harvest Moon. I can't believe they took that idea from you. I can't believe this. How could they? How could they? Trying to think of like, yeah, what kind of particularities would this have for the actual farming routine? I think I would want to kind of go for, I don't know. I mean, I really like exploration. So would I really want most of the game to just be regular farming stuff? Or would I want to dig into kind of an exploration vibe somehow? I don't know. Magical melodies. I'm a bit curious to see that farming game that Mr. Pedonkian has been working on. Wonder what's going to be different about it. Yeah. Finally. Cause yeah, he made like he worked on Stardew Valley for a while, and ended up in a that ended up turning a little sour. I forget the specifics, but yeah, like I think from what I understand, he was working on like a Stardew Valley um updates, and he like basically rewrote all of the game, I think, or something like that. And then he wanted to, I think it's like it's something like he wanted to be part of it is like he felt like his contributions to the game were sort of erased or downplayed after he had like disagreements with the dev. I think it's like he was asking to work on the sequel, but to work on the sequel, he was asking for like for profit share instead of a flat fee, and the dev refused. And like something, I don't know. There's some, some unfortunate. Yeah. I'm probably mixing parts of it up. That's what I remember. He was like talking about it on his Twitter. Yeah, if you want to know the specifics, you're gonna have to look up his Twitter, because I don't. It's not fresh enough in my mind that I can be confident that I'm relating it accurately here. So you probably want to hear it from him to get the actual story if you're interested. Yeah, all I remember for sure is like there was some disagreement or like about like attribution and something that involved, I think that involved working on like on Haunted Chocolatier or something like that, or maybe on working on like another, on like a later update, or I don't know, something like that. But yeah, check his Twitter to hear it from him. Yeah, that might be something like that. Yeah, it's true. It's true. That might be part of it. You know, like that's kind of part of the image of Stardew Valley, is that it's like a solo dev game. So that could be it. But yeah, I don't know.
No, it's time to stretch.
Oh, time to stretch, folks. Yeah, I remember that. I remember it coming off as that kind of deal. I remember it coming off as that kind of thing when I read about it. All right, let's do a little stretch, folks. Ooh. Otter? I hardly knew her. It's just random YouTube comments, Scaredactyl. It is funny every time I see it. I heard Lumpy made this. I can't believe Lumpy made all of this. It is funny. You did single-handedly create a lot of fucking theorizing from that one April Fool's video you made. Yeah. I still see people like including that as part of their theories. I still see people like sometimes arguing, like bringing up the YouTube exclusive Sybil ending as like an argument for something. Yeah, some people sometimes say that. I've seen a review like mention the Sybil ending as if it was in the game. Like in talking about how many endings the game has. There's even a special ending if you name your character a special way. Sometimes I wonder which of those are like AI generated. Oh. One recent review called me the Quebecer Junji Ito. Which, I mean, thank you, but what the hell are you talking about? What the hell are you smoking, the Quebecois Junji Ito? The hell are you talking about? I feel like it is a compliment, obviously, but it's such an absurd fucking thing to say about someone who put out one horror game. Like, no, but that's the thing. Like, there's like things that are obviously like Junji Ito inspired, but that's not the same thing as saying I'm the Quebecer Junji Ito. That's like a completely different thing. when I saw that, I kind of wondered if this was like an AI sign, like if that was a sign that this article was AI generated, right? Like maybe it's like it's found that people often mention Junji Ito in like reviews or things about the game because they mention like, oh, there's a reference of Junji Ito here. And maybe that like brings up Junji Ito's name as like a keyword. And so when it generates a review, there's like a chance that it does something like that. I wonder. That's what I'm thinking. Because it feels really absurd for someone who's put out exactly one product to be called that. You know? To be compared to someone with like a long storied, like legendary freaking career. Like that doesn't make sense. Like you say that about someone who's very prolific at least. Not someone who's literally put out one thing that was successful. Like that just makes no sense to me. So yeah, I'm wondering if this was like, yeah, like an AI generation, artifact, I guess. It's true. It's true. Maybe. What if Junji Ito was what if this whole time Junji Ito was the mysterious creator of Yumi Nikki? Yeah, there you go. Imagine. Changing the face of two completely unrelated but still kind of related art movements. Under two separate names. A Canadian hero that I would prefer to be compared to. A Canadian hero. It's true, it's true. That's someone else he could be. Your chats are being filtered? I didn't see any message like auto mod message or anything. How you doing, Fentrosity? You've posted in the chat here too before, so I don't know what's up. Can you still not post? The Prime message actually did go through. Damn. Bezos, get on it. Come on. Jeffrey. Fix your machine. Oh, it's Trevor Anderson. Oh, that, what? I didn't actually know it was Canadian, but, I mean, he might not be. Might be another phantasm. Another AI phantasm there. But yeah, maybe that was also... Maybe, like, because, I can imagine people comparing Trevor Henderson to Junji Ito. But, and, maybe that's the kind of article that an AI would have sampled to randomly call some other Canadian guy the Canadian Junji Ito. Well, there you go then. I don't know what artist I would want to be called the Canadian version of. I don't really know. Also, it would be the Quebecois version, really. Come on. I don't feel like I have a lot in common with Weird Al creatively, I do enjoy his work. Oh, it seems to work, Ventrosity. Welcome back. Bezos has allowed you to speak. Damn. Can't believe this. I can't believe I've lost the title already. Times move fast. Now that I've lost the title, I want it again. I was all blasé about it. But now that it's gone, it's gonna be my albatross. That's a good one. Damn. So you might call me the boss. I guess I would be. Get back to work. It might be fun. You know? You know? What if next weekend? What if next weekend I use this little farming game idea to kind of really get me back into Game Maker. That might be fun. Really stretch my legs a bit and get back into that. That might be fun. Kind of like a little game jam, but not really. I don't know. Yeah, I've been messing a bit with RPG with Game Maker recently. I've been messing a little bit with but it's been mostly like minor things. I didn't really like dig into anything meaty in a while with Game Maker. So I don't know, maybe that could be a nice little exercise. Get me through the motions a bit. Scary or unsettling dinosaur. Well, I think that's just it picking apart your name. Damn. You're right. QED. Well, ask it. Ask it the question. Is a Scarodactyl a scary dinosaur? You'll see. It's the only way to know for sure. Alas. Oh no. What has the machine said about me? You might, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how this one works. It might learn from the previous thing you told it. Okay. Well. The internet has spoken. I guess my hands are tied. I guess I really am the Quebecer version of a legendary artist. Of a legendary, prolific horror masterpiece maker, Junji Ito. I guess my hands are tied. You know? From the truth spoken from the mouth of machines. You know? Listen. Oh. Okay, hang on. Okay, I see. Now I wonder. Wait, did someone... Okay, but did someone edit this during the stream as a joke? I think maybe someone edited this during the stream as a joke. I think perhaps someone edited the stream, like during the stream. I did not mention that to anyone else before that. Otherwise, then that's probably where that article takes that. So someone wrote that. Okay. And when was the article written? Hang on. You did see that review, yeah? August 2nd by Calvin Kempf. I'm pretty sure that's where that comes from. So yeah, I guess they take that. Yep. They must just have taken that from TV Tropes. God. Well. But also, it's like known as, which implies that other people have called me that. Which I'm pretty sure. Which I'm pretty sure nobody else has ever called me that before. So I guess there you go. That's wiki editors writing history. Using their dark powers to write history. Yeah? You got him? What if it was the article's writer? What if it was the article's writer? These might be all like games that were in like the Yeah? Okay, not the same guy. We gotta find out who's at the bottom of this. Now I feel like I can't trust TV Tropes. Wait, anyone can edit that? But I was using it. I was using it to But where will I source my my entire understanding of culture now? All I have left now, all I have left is the work of CinemaSins. I had two things and now I have one. Where else will I what else will I consult to understand our culture? Okay, well, the heart animation's done. Look at that. Yeah, Junji Ito couldn't do this. That's right. All right, next is going to be the attack, but yeah, I was thinking I would maybe start on it, but that's probably... Now, the start isn't as bad. There's not as much to detail for the start, but then this part's going to be a little longer. It might take me 2 sessions to do this. Or maybe 1 session's going to do like most of it, and then I'll do the rest of it off stream. That could be it too. Blep, 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 blep. Flop. Alright. Okay, well, so that's gonna be it for tonight, folks. So before I go, let me link you all to my Patreon once more. So please consider supporting me on Patreon. Here's the link. And now let's see, who do I raid? Who do I raid? Oh, someone's playing. Look outside here. Okay, yeah. I'll raid Dino Dare, who's on her first playthrough of Look Outside, so people please be careful not to... Don't spoil anything. Don't spoil anything, please.
Scared Fred.
Alright, but yeah, thank you all for watching, and take care.
Oh, no. guys